Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be in the world. And welcome to the fourth Chinese Opera Forum in this series, but the first one online since 2016. In the past three forums, different Chinese directors of Peking and Kun opera troupes in the west coast of the US talked about working in America. This time, we have Americans talking about Chinese opera, using as the launching point East West Fusion Theatre's 1986 premiere of the supernatural comic thriller The Black Bowl. We have almost all the original cast members and artistic crew from that show. Now, let us introduce everyone. First up, that's me. I have been working with Chinese theater works, Kwang Yu Fong, since 1993 when I auditioned for the production of Zhang Boyle's The Ocean and have also performed in several other shows with the company. Professor Tu Wenwei is the president of the Chino Pearl, Chinese Oral and Performing Literature at Vassar College. He's also a professor. And Paul Chu has been a great supporter of this forum for 2 years at the Flushing Library in Queens, New York. Taviet Fair Service is right now in Malaysia, Penang, with 300 cats. She's the founder of East West Fusion Theatre. Stephen Kaplan is the co-artistic director of Chinese Theatre Works, puppeteer extraordinaire. Along with Kwang Yu Fong, co-founder and co-artistic director of Chinese Theatre Works. Jano Fairservice is the has been a costume and set designer all her life. She looks like Taviet's sister, but she's actually aged 93 and is a mother. David Simons is a composer, a musician, and adjunct professor at Fairleigh Dickinson University in New Jersey. Timothy Dolan, a very wise clown who has been teaching in high schools for a long time, recently in theater. Is that it? Okay, Peter Kisluk is the senior resident at Miami Children's Museum. Mark Solomon is a film editor and has taught at film schools and universities in the US and Britain. And that's who we have. Let us go to some video introductions by Professor Du Wenwei, the chair of Chino Pearl.
Sorry, let me replay it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm very happy to be here today representing China Pearl, the Association for Chinese Oral and Performing Literature. Our association was founded in 1969 by a group of eminent scholars such as Zhao Yanren, Harold Shaddock, and Cyril Birch. We devoted to researchers on the aspects of Chinese oral and performing literature. Our association is a scholarly international association with scholarly exchanges among researchers, artists, scholars from different regions of the world, including North America, Asia, Europe, and Australia. We hold annual conferences for many, many years. We also produce a refereed journal titled China Pearl, the Journal of Chinese Oral and Performing Literature. We were very happy in the past 5 years or so, joining a group of theatrical troupes and cultural organizations in Greater New York area, also with troops from New Jersey and Washington, D.C. So on the screen, you will see a list of these troops and cultural organizations. So the past 3 forums were initiated by Chinese theater works based in New York and featuring the list of the following troops. They are Chinese Theater Works, Asia Pacific Culture Art Center, Confucius Institute for Chinese Opera at Peking University, Flushing Council on Culture and Arts, Flushing Library, Quincy Society, New York Chinese Opera Society, Qi Shu Fang Opera Troupe, Renaissance Chinese Opera Company, Tong Xiaolin Chinese Opera Ensemble, and the Wintergreen Quincy Society. Here are some photos reflecting the past 3 forums. Forum 1 with a focus on tradition and innovation. Forum 2 with an emphasis on acting and producing. Forum 3, panel discussions between artists and audiences. Now, welcome to our current session, Forum 4, with a focus on cross-cultural experience, featuring the East-West Fusion Theater. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tu. Next up is Paul Chu of the Flushing Public Library.
Good evening. My name is Paul Chu. I'm the Assistant Library Manager at Queens Public Library at Flushing. Congratulations on the opening of the online opera forum. In past years, the Flushing Library has the opportunity to work with Chinese Theater Works and other organizations to host a Chinese opera forum in Flushing Library. The COVID-19 situation forced us to change the venue, so the first one is the online format. However, it will be a unique experience for all of us. Tonight, we're excited to welcome experts and artists to share their American experience in Chinese Peking opera. As a student of Chinese drama in my master's degree program in Fudan University many years ago, I was fortunate to meet Guang Yu and other Chinese opera artists and scholars in New York, particularly in Flushing. I'm interested in introducing this program to more audience in the form of Chinese version with translation work adding to it. Hopefully, the time will come soon and the library will open to all service in the post-pandemic era. Thanks everyone and wish the event great success.
Thank you. That was Paul Chu. And next up is Taviet Fairservice.
Hello from Penang, Malaysia. We are in total lockdown. Hello from Penang, Malaysia. We are in total lockdown here, and I hope that you and yours are safe and well. Of course, I'm not alone because in 2014, I found myself starting Cat Beach Penang, a cat sanctuary, no kill on the beach. And we have about 300 cats that we're caring for right now. Looking back, this was an extraordinary thing to hear from Miss Fong Kong Yu and think about the Black Bowl Chinese opera that we did way back in 1986. And I first met Guang Yu in 1983. So she's been a big part of my life, and it's a real honor to be part of this forum today. Between 1983 and 1993, East-West Fusion Theater did many productions, about 5 a summer, and then we would tour throughout the rest of the year, going to libraries and schools and museums. We were inspired by Asian performing arts, and many of the pieces were direct translations of Asian traditions into American English with American performers. And we worked with some extraordinary people from all over the world. And as we look back, as I'm looking back and working on a book about East-West Fusion Theater and a doctoral dissertation, it has occurred to me that these are, to this day, among the leading lights in the field of Asian performing arts and the scholarly study of Asian theaters. The idea for an East-West Fusion Theater grew out of the Asian Theater program at the University of Hawaii. I was a graduate assistant there to Dr. James Brandon, who was perhaps the leading light of what they call the pioneer generation of Asian theater scholars. His idea was that any theater practitioner would benefit by exposure to Asian performances. There's a tremendous amount of inspiration to be found there, and that any audience member could learn about not just the style, but also have insights into the cultures. So with some training, it didn't matter what kind of color skin you had or what kind of ethnic background, that you too could benefit by learning about performing arts of Asia. Inspiration and creativity comes from many places, and in my case, it came from my parents, Jeno and Walter Fairservice. My mother is a wonderful artist, and her costumes and sets for our productions really allowed us to go a lot further than we could have without her. My father was, in some ways, the real Indiana Jones, an archaeologist, anthropologist, and playwright, and actor and director. So we always had theater in our family, and they were very kind about allowing us to bring actors and musicians and artists of various kinds up to the country to share in Connecticut to produce new plays.
Thank you, Taviet. Next, let's bring on Stephen Kaplan.
Oh, hello everyone. It's so nice to be able to see you all out there in virtual space. And for the event tonight, wherever on the globe you happen to find yourself. As co-artistic director of Chinese Theater Works for a quarter century, I've been assisting Guang Yu in realizing CTW's mission of preserving and promoting traditional Chinese performances and creating new works that help bridge Eastern and Western theater practice. And these goals are at the heart of all the original productions that Guang Yu and I have been doing these last 30 years. And here's a very quick PowerPoint tour of some of these productions that we've been doing. First off, we have Climbing Gold Mountain, which was a show that Richard had a big part into. Then Toy Theater Peony Pavilion, which mixed classic kung fu opera with Western European style toy theater. And there's Richard again in his fairy mask. Oh, what's he doing? Okay. Little Red Riding Hood, the Chinese opera.
No, the white snake.
Oh, excuse me. That's Kung Shadow White Snake with mixing shadow puppets and kung fu opera. There's Little Red Riding Hood, the Chinese opera. Richard played the grandma in that. Richard's been in a lot of our shows. Just want you to know. And next, Mulan, Holding Up Half the Sky. And Songs from the Yellow Earth, which we created with the director of Bread and Puppet Theater, Peter Schumann. And also, over the last few years, we've been doing a series of productions with our Chinese opera performers we call Day Jobs Opera Dreams, in which we try to have them using their incredible performance skills to tell their own stories as immigrants to this country. All these various projects are rooted in Kwang Yu's experience with Taviot and with the East-West Fusion Theater's production, Black Bowl. As CTW continues to make new works, we keep wrestling with these same questions that we're going to be talking about in this forum. How to translate traditional repertoire for modern audiences. How to use Chinese performance technique to make new original theater works that engage widely diverse audiences. And how to teach Chinese opera technique to Western actors. And how to teach Western techniques to Chinese opera actors. It takes a lot of patience and empathy and experimentation to do this kind of cross-cultural work. And that's why we feel that tonight's forum is so important. We wanted to bring together the creative team that worked on the Black Bowl for almost 4 decades ago. And even though times have changed now, and there's more contact now between Asian and Western cultural traditions than maybe any time in history, we're still struggling to understand each other. And we hope that this forum can give those of us who are involved in cross-cultural theater work some useful strategies for how to create these bridges between our communities. And so, now without further ado, I'd like to introduce my creative and life partner, Kwang Yu Fang.
I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. I'd like to tell you why I chose for this project the Black Bowl out of all thousands of operas in the Chinese repertoire. First, Black Bowl features all 4 major character roles types: 生旦净丑, male, female, painted face, and clown. So in one play, we could demonstrate the full range of acting and movement style, vocal techniques, makeup, and costume. Secondly, the story takes place in 11 different locations, all represented by only a table and 2 chairs. This is a good way to show Americans how an empty space can be transformed with language and movement to indicate many different locations. The audience imagination is as important to this process as the actors are. Third, there are 2 legendary folk heroes in the play, both judges. Bao Gong is a well-known judge from the Song dynasty, and Zhong Kui from the Tang dynasty is the judge of the underworld. All Chinese people know them, so I felt it was a great idea to introduce them to Americans. Finally, I thought Black Bowl demonstrated something basic about Chinese opera: the mixing together of comedy and tragedy. In classical Western drama, going back to the Greeks, the dividing line between comedy and tragedy was very sharp. But Chinese opera does not make this division. On stage, as in life itself, laughter and tears stand side by side. I want to thank Teviot and the East West Fusion Theater for trusting me and for giving me my first chance to fulfill my American dream.
Thank you, Kwang Yu. Now let's take a trip down memory lane and look at the summary of the story. It begins with a silk merchant, Liu Shichang, who was going home with his servant, as we can see from the picture, and he stopped overnight at the house of a potter, Zhao Da, and asked for food and lodging. He was carrying a lot of money, so the potter and his wife were greedy and poisoned him to take his money. And so here we see the poison having the effect. Oh boy, very dramatic. And all this was witnessed by Zhong Kui, the demon hunter. And to destroy the evidence, the potter burnt Liu's body and mixed it with clay in his kiln to make a black bowl. Now, this guy is Zhang Biegu, who had lent Zhao money, but Zhao couldn't pay him or wouldn't, so he took the black bowl as payment. But that bowl was possessed by the ghost of the silk merchant who told him how he was murdered. And he insisted on getting justice. So with the help of Zhang, he went in the bowl that he possessed to the court of Bao Gong. And the ghost told the judge everything. As a result, Zhao and his wife were arrested and executed for murder. How's that for a story? So now let's go back to look at the Black Bull dress rehearsal videos.
Although we have just met, he thinks of this great consideration. Oh, my consideration first. Please remember tomorrow morning to put in some steps. Oh, I am so sleepy. I think I'll just lie down on the bed. Let's go, boy. Let's go to outside. See you tomorrow. I was so dizzy and sleepy a moment before, but suddenly my heart began to burn. Oh, I look to my servant, Liu Shan. I see he is already dead. Lion is dead. Trap set by Cao Cao.
Thank you. Now, we have a question for the panelists. What previous experience or connection with Chinese opera performance practices did you have?
I didn't start out interested in Chinese opera. I first got involved with Asian theater. This goes back to my college years. I was going to Pomona College and was studying theater, and I realized that theater degree might not be the best use of my time, economically speaking. So after my sophomore year, I took a year off to help me decide the direction of my life. I went to Europe to see the foundations of Western civilization, and then I headed off to India and then to Nepal to hike in the mountains. I finished by visiting Bangkok and then returned home with a good sense of cultural shock. Upon returning to college, I felt a renewed commitment to studying theater, but also a keen interest in things Asian. My college had a unique professor, Leonard Pronko, who, in addition to being a scholar of French theater, also had a deep understanding of kabuki, Japanese dance opera. I studied classical Japanese dance with Leonard and his partner, Takao. After leaving college, I traveled to New York and to work in the theater. I was going to auditions, and I saw in Backstage magazine an advertisement for East West Fusion Theater. I went to the audition and I performed the dance moves that I had learned from Leonard, and Tevi hired me, and I started working with the group. The idea of the company was to explore all forms of Asian theater, and that's when I met Kwang Yu and Chinese opera.
I believe I became interested in Chinese opera because of my interest and love for Asian culture. That started when I was very young. I read a book about judo and started to get interested in that. Took judo classes. Later, I moved on to Chinese martial arts, kung fu, and decided to study in Asia when I was in college. And I spent a year abroad living in Taiwan. Once I came back to the United States, moved to New York to become an actor. I was introduced to Peking opera through the East-West Fusion Theater. And it seemed like a perfect melding of my interest in Asian culture and my interest in acting. And I've always enjoyed it. I enjoy watching Peking opera. I've gone to many different Peking opera performances. And not only working with Kwang Yu Fong, but I've also worked with Jamie Guan, who was the choreographer for M Butterfly, as well as many other projects. And he and I did some touring and traveled around and performed some of the Peking opera martial arts shows, specifically the Monkey King. And that was something that I enjoyed quite a bit.
Well, I've been studying and performing music from many of the world's cultures. I also compose music, including operas, and I'm interested in how other people define that term. I purchased a guzheng, the 16-string Chinese zither, basically because it landed in my lap some 40 years ago. And I've experimented with it, discovering many ways of playing. One of those ways is to play music that was actually written for the instrument. So I began learning traditional Chinese music. I joined up with other musicians who were playing that music, some Chinese and some American. I also performed percussion with the Pan-Asian Repertory Theater in their production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, partially sung, spoken in Chinese with musical aspects of Peking opera. I worked with the East-West Fusion Theater in a Balinese performance piece, and I believe that is how I was connected with this project of Kwang Yu to mount an American version of Chinese opera.
Well, I've always been interested in the costumes and makeup that's used around the world. to enhance the effect of the actors or dancers. So I knew that Chinese opera is fabulous in this art. But I started research seriously when Teviot's East-West Fusion Theater did this production of the Chinese opera Black Bowl. I used these skills all through school and college. I apprenticed at the Straight Wharf Theater on Nantucket Island, and when I married Walter Fairservice, we and our actor friends started a theater called Center Spot Players. This lasted for several years, and Teviot used to sit and watch rehearsals when she was just a little girl. These years of experience naturally led on to the plays that Teviot produced with the East-West Fusion Theater.
Sorry, 冯老师, you are muted.
Okay. Growing up in Taiwan, I knew very little about Chinese opera until I passed the audition to get into the Chinese Cultural University's Chinese opera department. I was in deep cultural shock when I first started training, but by my junior year, I had made the decision that introducing and promoting Chinese theater to the world was going to be my life's mission. And that's what I have been doing ever since. I came to New York to study Western theater in 1983. My very first week in the US, I went to the American Theater Association convention in Minneapolis, where I conducted a Chinese opera workshop. To model the costumes for me, I chose the most beautiful, charming lady in the classroom. It turned out to be Teviot. In 1986, I met her again. She asked me to perform with her, but I requested instead that I direct an opera play with her company. She agreed, and that's how we started.
Thank you, Kwang Yu. Well, next, let's hear what the process was like creating and performing Black Bowl in 1986.
Sorry, Richard.
Oh,
We
sorry. Okay.
there's
We have a
a
videotape first.
The recitative is almost like a rhythmic speech or even like a rap that a character performs. And a lot of the time it's clown characters, like the clown character that I played. This is John Diego, an old man who is a straw sandal maker. And he's trying to get back the money he's owed from a fairly wealthy man who is not paid his bill. And it goes something like this. I am getting old and my back is bad. Life is hard without a wife. I have no son, and that's my life. And so you see, I work all day to weave straw shoes, weave straw shoes. Old man, bad back, head bent so. Old tree, scorched bark, leaves hang low. Eggplant grows old, lots of seeds. Ripened melon tastes so sweet. And that's his entrance. Thank you.
Thank you, artists. Next, let us hear from them what the process of creating and performing Black Bull was like. How did this production affect their later creative work?
Almost everything about this production was new and different for me, except for the story. I had to translate the script and in only 2 weeks, train the actors in 4 different role types, each with her own way of speaking, moving, and dressing, and get them up to the performance speed. David Simons wrote music and performed more than 10 instruments alone, standing in for the 10-piece orchestra that usually accompanies Chinese opera. Also, I invited my teacher Sun Yuanbing to come from Taiwan to perform Zhongkui role. What really made a big impression on me was the joy that surrounded the work process. The actors, while working extremely hard, were also having fun. They were always improvising and joking around with their characters. We end up keeping some of those playful bits in the final piece. At the end of the hard working day, they would jump into the pool, and then we will have a great meal prepared by our wonderful producer, costume maker, then mother, general fair service. Next one.
Look how young we were. Looking back, this was the core group of performers for East West Fusion Theater's repertoire. As you can see, they're dressed in Japanese costume because we were doing Kyogen comedies at that time. And then Gong Yu in the center came to visit us as we were planning to do the Black Bowl. Mark was to play the Baogong, the judge, the famous judge. Peter in the middle was the hero, Liu Xian. And Zhang Biegu, Timothy Dolan brought his years of Chinese martial arts to a wonderful comic role as the clown character. The Black Bowl premiered in 1986 at our home in Connecticut, in Sharon, Connecticut. And we sat out on the porch and worked on translation. How do you make jokes in English that match the Chinese materials? How do you fit English language words into recitative and songs? So the translation project was a main part of the work on the Black Bowl. Later in 1981, when I was teaching at Long Island University CW Post Campus, we were producing the Asian Theater Festival, and I asked Guang Yu if she would come and help train the students in Chinese opera and do the Black Bowl again. Of all of my memories looking back at the Black Bowl production, probably the strongest one is remembering Mr. Sun Yuanbing, the late brilliant Chinese opera artist from Taiwan, who flew from Taiwan to New York to come and play Zhongkui, the judge of hell, the god of hell. And he had this apparatus that he put in his mouth. And on stage, he appeared at the end of the play, and he spit fire. It was spectacular.
It was in our second season that we staged the Black Bowl with Kwang Yu as director. Since I'd already spent 1 year learning different Asian theater styles, I was excited to take on this new challenge. Balinese topeng emphasized a tightness in the shoulders with quick articulated hand movements. And Japanese kyogen focused on koshi, solidness in the hips. But Chinese opera had more of an acrobatic flow. Also, the tonal aspects of the Chinese language were incomprehensible to me. We must have spent half an hour just trying to get me to pronounce my character's name, Liu Shichang. Liu Shichang. I remember practicing my walk in those high platform shoes while waving a stick, which signified riding a horse. There were multiple rhythms going on in just that one sequence. Now, this was an art form that took years, if not decades, to master, and we were going to do it in 2 weeks. So I don't think our technique was really up to snuff, but our ability in theater would be the energy that made the fusion work. Another element that was novel and challenging was the music. Kwang Yu gave us vocal exercises which showed us where to place the vocal resonances, but it was my job and the job of musical director David Simons to westernize it for the American ear. In the last song, for example, I wanted to bend the melody and use a bluesy seventh note, but Kwang Yu would always say, "Too blue." I am thinking, here is a ghost, Lu Shichang, who just wants justice because he was murdered and his bones made into a black bowl. When the bowl is finally sold to a poor sandal maker, he convinces him, the sandal maker, by giving him a headache, to bring him to the judge, Bao Gong. So Lu Shichang sings this last song for the judge. Of course it has to be blue. Well, David and I convinced her to let the seventh note stand. Shall I sing it for you? My first name is Lu Shichang. My family is Leo. I bought and sold silks and satins in the capital of our hometown. They killed my servant and me and turned me into a black bowl, a black bowl, a black bowl, and threw me in a storeroom. If Chong Bie-gu had not come through, how could I speak to you in your court today? Please correct this injustice. Please correct this injustice. Please correct this injustice for me.
My experience is working on Black Bull at East West Fusion Theater up in Connecticut included a lot of training in the movement and characterization for the character that I played, Zhang Biegu. And I really enjoyed that because that's really my, I guess my strong suit is clown characters or comical characters. That's what I enjoy performing more than anything else. And this is an old man who's kind of a clown character and had some what we call recitative in his character, the way it was written. And we all got together, the performers as well as musician David Simons and Kwang Yu, all got together and we worked on the script together. And that was fantastic because we had to translate the script and make it make sense for American audiences. And performing it was equally as fun and exciting because we got to see what kind of things Chinese audiences enjoy and how our American sort of look at things gave it a different take in terms of what Chinese opera really is. And I think the whole idea behind performing Chinese opera is a little bit different for American actors and performers because we do it's a lot more of a presentational style where we do break the fourth wall more than occasionally, but quite consistently throughout the performance. And I think that really opens you up as a performer because you're not only relating to the other characters on stage, but you're relating directly to the audience. And I found that a lot of fun. It's almost like you're performing specifically for the audience as almost like a stand-up comic in some form or another as the comic character in the show. And it's an older show. It's based on a Chinese sort of ghost story, and it's good to have a little bit of the fear element and the strangeness of the story, along with the way there's comedy involved in it. So it has that yin yang quality, right? It has both sides. And that to me makes it much more enjoyable to perform and train for, as well as to watch.
So the experience of developing Black Bull was a lot of fun. I had worked with many of the troupe already, so I was among friends. The beautiful grounds of East-West Fusion Theater in Connecticut provided a great summer residency. I had recently returned from a tour of Korea and came back with gongs, which I used in the production. I managed to substitute from my arsenal of instruments those that helped carry the story and create a unique aesthetic. I did have a Chinese bamboo flute, Thai mouth organ, can, and the guzheng. I also used Philippine bamboo buzzing sticks and my adapted electric slide guitar. This instrument is useful for extraordinary, even supernatural effects when I lay metal objects on the strings, like a sheet of spring steel, or scrape or strike metal on the strings, which activate the eerie sounds.
Well, part of my day was being hostess to all the actors. I fed them along with my family in our dining room or on the big porch overlooking the fields and the woodlands. They'll remember that. We housed them in a great guest house right next to the Barn Theater where they rehearsed the plays. And many hours of my day were spent alone in my studio where I did the designing and I made the costumes. For Black Bull, there were a number of black tops and pants that I made for the stagehands. But the most fun were the voluminous robes for characters that didn't need costumes made of richly colored silk embroidered fabric. But I could make them look like, ancient Chinese paintings. Because Kwang Yu was connected with Chinese opera people in New York City, she had wonderful robes for the women. And a few Chinese actors came to play traditional roles in the production, and they brought their richly embroidered costumes with them. I figured out how to make theater beards from wire and long hair by looking at pictures in a book from my husband's wonderful library. He owned hundreds of Asian culture books that he used for reference when he was writing his books and for planning museums exhibits for the Hall of Asian Peoples at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City.
I have seen what happens
Thank you. Let me ask Mark Solomon what your experience was like in the production, because we didn't have your video earlier.
Hi. First of all, thank you. I really appreciate being able to participate in this event this evening. It was a fantastic experience. Working with Peter and Tim and Teviot and Jano and David on the East-West Fusion Theater, and particularly on Black Bull, was a fascinating and mind-expanding experience. And the lessons that I learned about aesthetics and performance, I've carried over into my work that I've ever since then. It was really a life-changing event to be exposed to the culture and aesthetics of Chinese opera, as well as the other Asian theater forms that we worked on together. It was a very memorable and exciting time.
Great, thank you so much. Tavia, let's hear about your personal experience in Black Bull. Tavia, are you there? Hi.
Well, part of what I was looking back is it was wonderful to actually get to do Chinese opera. I had studied it and I knew something about the history and about the incredible influence of Mélenchon back in the early 20s, how that changed so much of theater tradition in the West by exposure to Chinese opera. And so there's that tradition of Western people looking at this interesting form and how it changes the way that you think about theater and spectacle and all of the aspects. So when I think about Black Bull, I think about how that project pulled together so much of what Chinese opera is about. As Guang Yu mentioned, the four main character types are there, the wonderful tragicomedy, and it was very appropriate for American audiences, and it was a lot of fun to work on and fun to perform. And when I did it again at C.W. Post, Long Island University, you could see that the students were very much affected by it. Some of them were very shy, some of them were very timid about being on stage, and when you have to go out and present yourself to an audience, it can really affect your ability as a performer, perhaps even as a politician or a presenter or a speaker of some kind. So again, I treasure the friendships that came out of that experience as well. Guang Yu has been very important to me. These gentlemen that you see today, I'm still so grateful to them for the many years and the many hours that they put in to make East-West Fusion Theater possible. Thank you.
Now let's open this up to different questions about cross-cultural pioneers and doing cross-cultural experiences and the importance of Chinese opera to theater now. And for the audience, if you have any questions, please go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, the Q&A button, where you can type in your questions. So let me begin by saying, like, every one of you are obviously fans of Chinese opera, but today, as we know, in China, in America, elsewhere, people are more interested in TV, film, rap music, whatever. How would you convince directors, playwrights, producers, and the audience that they should give a damn about Chinese opera? Who would like to start?
I'll take a try
Peter.
at that. I think, we're at a point where the country of China is becoming very, very important. I mean, they have a rover on the moon, and they send another thing to Mars. And so they, in America's imagination, China is a very serious player. And I think through Chinese traditional opera or just traditional philosophies and art,
that we could learn a lot about this very important country that is now, on the world stage.
But even young audiences in China don't care about it. So maybe Professor Du would like to address that since you're from Shanghai.
Yes, thank you. So I try to answer the question. And because I remember when I listened to the panelists talking, and the two of you already mentioned the two big names. One is the James Brandon, the other is the Leonard Prankel, right? So I remember around the 2000, and there was a conference, international conference, and held at Pomona, and so honoring and Professor Prankel, and then out of that conference came a journal, Mime Journal. So published a series of articles, journal articles about the East-West fusion theater. So I attended. Of course, I write the Western influence upon Chinese theater. So to answer your question, so the influence are mutual. And I did research on the early ages, like the decades of the 20s and 30s and 40s and 60s and 70s, for the Western adaptation of Chinese traditional theater, just like Black Bull. But also, now in China, and so lots of theatrical, we call it 戏曲, is an operatic theater. So adaptation of the Western classics. For example, say the King Lear, all right, like Macbeth, okay, not only Shakespeare's classics, but some other, even some novels, all right, classic novels turned into the Chinese theatrical adaptation, I mean operatic theatrical called 戏曲, Xiqu. So in those cases, actually getting to the young people in China, so the young people, they still have lots of fans. And they went to the different troops and going to the colleges and even to the high schools and the middle school, and to introduce traditional aspects of performing arts. And also there's another phenomenon that we call the 戏歌, that means combination of the popular song using different tunes from different regional operatic theater. For example, you have a 京歌, means the song using the Beijing opera, the tune. So kind of popular. Young people listen to them. And also in the West, and one of you already said, say, you had in the early, like say, probably, I forgot, maybe the 70s or the 80s, you took the classes taught by Professor Prankel. And there are some centers in American colleges, okay? For example, East-West Center in Hawaii, and Tevi's already mentioned, okay? So they educate young people. And then now these people become the professors and teachers and educate the even younger generation of the West students. And for me, for example, so I'm also teaching Chinese theater and comparative theater, East and West. So of course, this is not like a popular form, but actually, and some people, the students, younger generation of the Western students, as well as the Chinese students, and they kind of say they are learning these kind of stuffs. That's why I do think there are successes at the professional level. At the same time, you have at the amateur level. And even the international students studying in China, this morning, it happened. Some of people just give me the WeChat, the image. It's the international students in China singing Beijing opera, performing. So this is my take, and just add my perspective to your questions.
Thank you, Professor Du. It's good that there are some people who in America who are learning Chinese opera techniques and using them in their own productions. But um, in recent decades, we've seen Chinese opera being used as decoration to attract Western audiences through the beautiful costumes and the exotic music and so forth. Can we go beyond that to be more organic in the use of Chinese opera in Western theater? Would anyone like to venture to answer that? Yes, Stephen.
Oh, thank you. I I would just like to address that because I feel. Oh, sorry, should be in the middle. I feel a lot of the work that Kwang Yu and I have been doing, especially Kwang Yu, is thinking about this, and Richard has been part of the experiments we've done, and I mean part of the struggle we have is because we're not playing for just white people or Chinese. It's total. It's incredible cultural mix in Queens where our home is, and we want to make shows that are universal. And I think in some ways Chinese theater practice really gets at to something very central and human as a communication, a visual form, movement form of communication that really works well on the theater. And no matter what scale you do it on, I mean, we use a lot of puppetry in our performances, but also large scale, large spectacle. So we think there is a way of doing it, but whether it has market value is totally another issue, and that's not so much something that the artist. I mean, the artist has to adapt themselves to the economic realities of the field wherever they are, but we, I think, have the tools to be able to do it if and when the market allows.
In the decades that you have been doing this, have you seen any change?
Yes. I mean, there has been a change because I think because Chinese culture has been kind of percolating into the mainstream in a way, especially in the 80s and 90s. We started working with all these young Chinese opera artists who were leaving China, coming to the U.S. and they ended up working with us on our project. So we've been really and we've the last couple decades too, a lot of schools, especially the international schools, are teaching Mandarin and Chinese culture. So it is expanding, at least in New York and big metropolitan areas. The rest of the country, maybe it's going a different direction.
Has it grown out of the niche to a more wider commercial acceptance?
I can't say that it has a commercial acceptance. I mean, I think it's still, by its nature, not mainstream. So, would anybody else like to add to that? Some of you smart people out there?
Mark raised his hand.
Oh,
yeah, I would look at a broader view that I think that, in the teaching that I teach film students and animation students, and I bring in Chinese opera to show them like the two men fighting in the dark on stage and using like a minimum, how to use imagination and limited resources to create an imaginative world. And I think it's like seeding the young generations with ideas that are drawn from Chinese opera, more than just the decoration, but the sort of aesthetic. And I think that it applies. I mean, it applies in animation. The links between animation and shadow puppetry goes way back. And I think that it just gives people a richer palette to draw from to create new work.
Yes, I think you're totally right. And that the way art has been evolving, especially now that a lot of it is online, people are able to see stuff from all over the world in platforms like what we're using today. There really is a future for this if someone is going to grasp it and seize it. So
how about the Kung Fu Panda? That film, the Kung Fu Panda.
I know those people.
Right, that became very popular, and I think maybe introduced people to an aesthetic. So I mean, the context, right? The context of Chinese opera, Peking opera, martial arts. The theatrical context could change, and the filmic context could change, but it could use elements that are present in the traditional art forms.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'd love to see Sun Wukong replace Kung Fu Panda, though.
What's that one?
I'd love to see Sun Wukong stepping into popular theater rather than Panda.
Well, Netflix is
Could I add one more example?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just want, because one of you mentioned about Jimmy Guan, all right, as the artist director of the M Butterfly in the 1988 version. But there is also 2017 version, and I think Steve participated in it because you create the two butterfly image. So if you compare these two versions, all right, so one is 1988 and the other is 2017, actually there is a big jump by adding more Chinese theatrical aspect into the new version. And Jimmy Quan only choreographed the Peking opera, the fighting. And I think I remember we invited him to our campus to talk about it. That was a long time ago. But 2017, they add not only the martial arts, but also the performance of the butterfly love story in a Chinese style. So this example, so actually you have a more room consciously and try to absorb by the playwright as well as the director. So the famous director who was director of the what, Lion King. Okay, so
yeah, Julie Taymor.
But I have a question. Was it more than just decoration? Julie Taymor loves to borrow ideas from the East to show her genius. And I'm wondering, was it organic or was it more?
Well, I think it's more than just window dressing. I think she really does understand, and she understands the power of those kind of theater conventions that are perfected in these old forms of theater, and she likes to use them. And so I think, yes, in some ways, I don't know if you'd call it pandering, but I think she used it honestly, at least, for not just for effect, but that because it really did help emote. And they let the actors, like the way Chinese opera does, extend beyond their bodies in a way that they, yeah. So I think it does. So it did have more than that.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, will we ever get to a level where quality control is a problem, where Chinese opera is so popular among contemporary and Western directors that
Can
yes.
I add something? Yeah.
Sure.
Hi. And talking about the M Butterfly, I actually did 3 productions. The recent one was done by Julie Taymor. I was the trainer for a wonderful, wonderful Korean actor. And I was really impressed by how well he learned and take it so seriously. But I like to talk about my experience. The second one was with director Michael Mayer. And when I worked with him, I gave him a lesson about Chinese theater. And then after that, he told me, he said, after I listened to you, I changed totally from what I had planned before. And he used a lot of cheers. He said, oh, wow, you know, what you told me really makes sense. So I feel like the serious artist, like Timothy, like Mark, like Peter, like David Simon here, you all take it seriously. You are not, they are not just taking that as a decoration, right? And every time I talk to Peter, Peter right away can sing the song. He said, I could never forget. And Timothy right away like to do the recitation. I do feel it's not on the surface. To them, they really understand the value of Eastern performing art, and I think they have something to say about underneath what is underneath. So I like to hear from Peter and from Timothy and from the people who work here. Can we can you talk about, Peter? Would you like to talk about first the value of Chinese and the Asian theater?
Well, I have to say that as opposed to Tim, I was more drawn to Balinese and Japanese theater, and I utilized a lot of that stuff in lots of things. So the Chinese, I was never as acrobatic as Tim. And in fact, one of the few things that I still do about Chinese opera was Tim taught me this dragon chases his tail exercise. And I think one of the things for me that these Asian theater forms, they teach you how to use the body in a very true way. Like in ballet, it forms the body in this particular way. The same is true with all the other ones, is that they train the body so it looks the way that aesthetic is. And the Chinese acrobatic aesthetic is really amazing. And the biggest thing that I see in the Chinese opera.
Working both with Kwang Yu and then later on with Jamie Guan, I got to see both sides of Peking Opera Theater, because Kwang Yu really concentrated on the characterization and the beautiful movement of the actors and the way the characters are supposed to move, with a little thing with their hands, just the way their hands are held, or just the way the eyes are. I'll never forget what she said to me, her direction to me at the beginning of when I was coming out as the character John Biegu. She said, what's most important is your eyes, the way you come out and the way you look at the audience, and you connect with the audience right away. And that's something that traditionally is not done in Western theater. You don't look at the audience, you look at the other character, and you may just walk onto stage and in a very casual way. You don't walk onto stage in the Peking Opera casually at all, ever. Every character that comes onto the stage has a dramatic entrance. It's very theatrical. And the more theatrical it is, the easier it is for the audience to understand who that character is. And the same thing was true with Jamie Guan when I was doing the martial arts, martial arts stories. What's the one? Meeting at Crossroads Inn or something like that. Yes.
In the dark.
Yeah, that's the one. And that is a tremendous theatrical accomplishment that the Peking Opera is absolutely perfected. How to use very little and then communicate so much with so little. You don't need a whole lot of props or set pieces or anything like that. It's the imagination of the audience that you pull on, and that draws the whole story together. And that to me is a fantastic part of Peking Opera, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, one of the things I wanted to add, you talked about that the entrance of the character, and it's become one of my theater rules is that you get the first 60 seconds. The first 60 seconds that you're on the stage, you got to win over the audience somehow. You know, whatever it is you do, because once you get them, then you can take them anywhere.
Exactly.
You can say, okay, now we're flying around, and they would believe it as long as you get them in that first minute.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my hard and fast rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was the wonderful thing about East-West Fusion Theater is that you get to see the intersection of different Asian theater forms, because you get like that idea of like coming out and meeting the audience right away came from the Kyogen. I remember where I always talk to the students about that, is that, you know, how to apply that there. You come out and you breathe with the audience, and you try to listen to the audience breathe and then direct their breath over the course of the performance. And how that applies to film editing or animation is a way to draw on different, you know, new different resources to sort of enrich the work that you do. Makes it great fun.
Yeah, I remember Ikimashoka.
Oh my cool.
You know, in Japanese Kyogen, you wait and listen to the audience, and when the moment for them to start, it's not the stage manager, it's the head actors turning back to the second guy going, "Are you ready?" He goes, "I'm ready."
Ready.
And then he says, "Open the curtain." And it's so much in control of the actor, which is what I love. I love being in control of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what a gift it was to be able to inhabit a theater form like Chinese opera.
Yeah.
You get a chance to see what it's like, even just, you know, briefly, like with a couple of weeks rehearsal, but to hear the music and wear the costumes and get to feel how that is, how different it is to like a naturalistic Western theater style.
Where else could you do that but East-West Fusion Theater?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there was nothing like seeing Mr. Soon blow sparks out of his mouth.
Yeah.
That was just amazing.
Amazing. It was great. It was great.
I'm curious to know that in the 35 years since you all have been doing this, whether you've seen a greater acceptance in American theater of Chinese theater, or how has the degree of acceptance changed and the integration of Chinese opera?
I don't know if I've seen so much of it in the theater, but definitely in film. You see a lot of it because of the, you know, enormous amount of Chinese pictures, Chinese movies that are coming out, and the great directors from from China, and they incorporate, you know, Peking opera or aspects of Peking opera into their shows, even if it's just off to the side in the background or something like that. But I think they understand, obviously, how important it is perhaps to their development as artists. And so they want to draw on that when they're putting their films together. And you've seen a lot in a lot of different films. What was it? The Farewell My Concubine, and you know, a lot of different Chinese films.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crouching Tiger.
That was very popular here, and that was a lot of that's based on Chinese opera.
Yes, yes.
There was a film, Peking Opera Blues, right? That took
Yes.
place during the Revolution.
Yep. That's great.
Really spectacular film.
Absolutely.
There's a Farewell My Concubine Broadway musical that's under development.
Wow.
Yep.
That would be great.
Oh, cool.
See, what they need on Broadway is they need the wealthy Chinese producers to come through, and then they can do what they want.
Well, there are a lot of empty theaters there now. If one
Yeah.
buy one, you're welcome.
Buy one, get one free.
Connie, why don't you answer?
I would like to share something that a lot of Americans is not aware of. Like started in 1998, 99, there was a wave of Chinese opera performer immigrant to America. And because of that, our company become very important base for them to help them to get their green card. And because that, we have to create a lot of performance opportunity to prove they are like excellent in performing art. So that's why together we work many places that Stephen showed before, like Little Red Riding Hood in Chinese opera style, and the White Snake in with mixing with shadow puppets, and the Peony Pavilion with toy theater. You know, so we got chance because we got so many wonderful, talented Peking opera artists working with us.
And actually, this fall, we're going to be creating a huge zhonghui pageant with 12-foot zhonghui.
Yeah.
For
here,
in Queens. Yes, I'm here up to the side. So we're still doing it. We're still trying to use CTW as a platform for these Chinese artists who are now settled here in the U.S. and have families and everything.
Yeah, and actually, that's 2020 is a very weird time for Chinese theater works because we got an invitation to do Mulan as a shadow theater in Epcot Center in Florida.
Wow.
Talking about commercial, value, that was the biggest the commercial gig we ever got.
Or we're talking about getting.
And we met the own the COVID-19, which had never happened before. So we lose, talking about commercial, we lose whole year of performing fees and teaching fee.
But on the other hand,
but I do want to say here, I really appreciate my classmate in college. I told him, and in 1 second, he said, "Okay, I'll help you. How much do you need to pass through this hard time?" I said, $50,000. American dollars, 50. He said, "Don't worry, I gave you."
Wow.
So because all my classmates know that I'm opera maniac. They all help me. So this is
but
a
they
really
must also have some nostalgia. They want to feel that too as part of the American cultural.
Do you want to come around?
No.
Stephen was talking. That's Stephen become this is a puppet's zhonghui. Okay, so yes, we are going to do zhonghui as a huge puppets and live. Yes. Hi, zhonghui.
We literally have just like 2 minutes left. I don't know if any of our audience has any questions.
I think I want everybody to draw attention to the comments made in the chat and also made in the question and answers. Those are brilliant. They're from the scholars. So if you have time, you can copy it and read it if we do not have time today. All right. So these are the scholars and also the directors.
We should join together.
We do have the last a little bit video from the Black Ball, right?
Yes, we do.
Sorry, that's the very end. And now is the answer, the part to answer all the audience question. And we already got 2 questions from the audience and some comments in the chat room. So maybe if we can answer this 2 questions first, then we can maybe
Can you read them out?
You can
Zoe?
see it. It's just if you click the Q&A and you can see there's two.
Ah, I see. Okay. I wonder how this production was received by Chinese practitioners who might have felt you were encroaching on their tradition. From Jonas Feltz, Kyoto, sorry.
Debbie, would you like to answer? David?
I think that certainly from the days of Black Bull, we also were working with and becoming close friends with the Yeyu Chinese opera from downtown Chinatown in Manhattan. And Yeyu was very supportive. This was a Chinese cultural association. We discovered that there were Chinese cultural associations across the country where the communities were supporting each other. One thing I'm seeing here in Penang is every summer we have, there are Chinese theaters around here. And every summer there's a Cantonese opera being done in our backyard at Cat Beach, Penang. And so there's a life to it. I felt that Chinese folks were very delighted that we whiteface folks would be interested in their culture and in their arts. So I felt that at least for East West Fusion Theater, in terms of audience, we got a lot of support from the Chinese communities.
Yes, I remember when Timothy was performing on the stage, and in the auditorium, the Chinese, amateur the performers went to perform as well. He asked me, he said, "Is this Zhang Biegu American or Chinese? How could he did the recitation just like Chinese, right?" And over in I'm reading the guest, and there is a professor from Chinese Opera Academy, Miss Professor Liu Suoshen, and he comment on Zhang Biegu's performance, and the singing part of Peter was so good. So that's from the professional from Beijing. Okay, that's really great. Thank you, Liu 老师.
And Carol Sorgenfrey commented that as a university professor, a playwright director who is committed to using fusion in my work, I have to say there's a lot of hesitation and provincialism in America, but we must keep working because we are doing what real theater is all about.
Yes, thank you.
Theater is a great way for people to know. Thank you, Carol.
I had this, back when we were doing this, I was always wondering what, subject could we do that would have the resonance with American culture? Like, for Chinese opera, if you know Chinese history, you know all those characters, or even the Monkey King, but what would serve that purpose in America? And I always thought, wow, what would work would be the American Revolution and the concepts we have about, the founding of this country. And I was never able to do anything, but to my surprise, Hamilton came onto Broadway and really did that, because all Americans have this knowledge of something about these people, and that's what you need to draw on, is that background in knowledge that they have. The Chinese people wouldn't know that much about George Washington, but Americans do. And I think, any theater that draws that deeply into the culture has to be rooted in those, myths of America.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the Gamelan group that I used to play with, the Gamelan Son of Lion, did a shadow puppet theater of the Benedict Arnold and the treason, right? The act of treason. And it's a very important part of American history, and during the Revolutionary War, and yet it was done in gamelan style. So even as far as playing Yankee Doodle Dandy on gamelan instruments, but it was shadow puppets in the Javanese style. So it worked pretty well. But we all knew the story. It was familiar to us.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this wonderful forum and for the audience to make your comments and ask questions as well. Next, let's go to a video clip from Black Bowl.
So should everybody say goodbye, or you want me
The idea is
Okay,
that
now
this
we
is
say goodbye.
our
Now
curtain
first.
call.
Okay,
so
first,
everybody,
thank you, Jano. Thank you.
Great to see you, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Kwang Yu. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see everybody again.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe. Oh wow, Peter has David Simon has a Shen. Yes. Thank you, and hopes. Again, meet the Paul Chiu from Flashen want to make this one into Chinese version, and we hope we can do that soon to make that happen. Thank you, everybody, and welcome, and thank you, Eleanor, who wrote some comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will see the very, very last videotape now. The curtain call.
Woo! Yay!
Yay! There he is. Yeah, there he is, the man.
The judge of heaven or of hell?
Hell. Hell.
Okay.
The underworld.
Heaven, hell, same difference. Correcto.
Oh.
Great.
Very nice.
Yeah, that was fun. Let's do it again.
Redo.
Really appreciate
We do that
taking your-
again in Chinese. Everybody, please learn Chinese.
Yes.
Okay.
Translate all your-
I'm free this weekend. Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
Zaijian, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Peter,
West Fusion Theater
call me
reunion.
when you come up, Peter.
Okay, I will.
Reunion.
Bye,
Next week.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Kwang Yu. Bye-bye.
Let's meet again.
Yes.
Good
Okay.
to see you. all.
Could you save the comments in the chat and the question and answers? Anybody? Yeah. Save them.
Yes.
If you say, yeah, some of the comments are yeah, very good. Okay, so save that as a part of the audience interaction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Kwang Yu.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Kwang Yu.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
How'd
you,
it go?
technical crew, for pulling this all
Yes,
together.
very
That's
good,
an awful
very
lot
good
of
technical.
material.
Yes.
Bye,
Thank
David.
you,
Bye,
the team.
Tim. Bye,
Thank
Debbie.
you.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
Dan. Bye,
Thank
Kwang Yu.
you.
Bye,
Okay,
Jano.
let's get in
Bye,
touch
Debbie.
again.
Peter, Timmy, Mark, David,
Again.
oh my goodness.
再见，再见，再见，再见。
谢谢，谢谢呀。